This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Let's talk about overachievers so far this year for the Cleveland Browns. Which Browns players have overachieved the expectations? And I think there's going to be some controversial names on this list, but I think if we look back at this at the end of the season, some people will see it my way more than they're willing to see it now. But the first guy on this list, and probably the most controversial guy I'm going to have on this list that's overachieved, is PJ Walker. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, he's terrible, Quincy. He's bad. He has all these turnovers. And I get it. He's not good. He's a backup quarterback for a reason. But if I told you you had to play PJ Walker for the majority of snaps in 3 games this year at the beginning of the season, look me dead in the eye and tell me you think this team would have had a 2-1 record in that stretch. Please do. Tell me that you think it would even be possible to win 2 games with PJ Walker. Okay, that's why he's an overachiever, because you can say whatever you want about how the results happen, but when it comes to backup quarterbacks, I don't care. I just care about the results, right? If it was DTR, I care about the results and how it happens, the process and how it happens, because he's somebody who has a future with this team. Same thing with Deshaun Watson, right? The results are secondary to the process of it. But DTR and Deshaun Watson are obviously different cases than the PJ Walker. PJ Walker's not a part of your future plans. PJ Walker might not make it on this team to the end of the season. PJ Walker not going to be on this team next year. So I don't care what the process is for PJ. All I care about is that he did enough to help you win a game or 2. And you have won a game or 2 when you played PJ Walker. Again, you can tell me all the bad stats about him. I understand. But when it comes to a backup quarterback like PJ Walker, a veteran guy who's been bouncing around on the bottom of rosters for years, he's not like a upper tier backup. He's not Jacoby Brissett. You don't really have expectations of him. And again, ask yourself this question and be 100% honest with yourself. If I told you you had to play 3 games where PJ Walker takes the majority of snaps at quarterback, what did you think the record would be? And then if I told you those 3 games would be against the Colts on the road, the Seahawks on the road, and the 49ers at home, what do you think the results would be of that? Something tells me y'all wouldn't have guessed that they would have gone 2-1. You could say it was in spite of PJ Walker, but the truth is whenever you have a backup quarterback, especially a backup quarterback at the level of PJ Walker, you're going to win in spite, right? Like, he's not the level of quarterback that you win because of. Like, we only talk about the quarterbacks that you win because of as like the top 12 guys in the NFL. That's not going to be PJ Walker. PJ Walker, you're going to win in spite of, but as long as he doesn't do enough to lose you the game, you feel fine with him. And 3 games, 2 wins with him, I feel like that's overachieving. The next thing we're going to go to is this run game. Because quiet is kept, this run game is on pace to have 2,500 rushing yards this year. I believe that's very similar to what they had last year when it comes to rushing yards. But the fact that they're even close to the pace, I thought that after you lost Nick Chubb, you would be lucky to get 2,000 yards rushing from your running back room, because Nick Chubb accounts for like 1,500 yards. Last year, the Cleveland Browns got 2,490 rushing yards. This year, the Browns are on pace for 2,525 rushing yards. So they're on pace to have more rushing yards than last year. That's massively overachieving. Now, it doesn't make up for not having Nick Chubb, and I don't think it's better than having Nick Chubb, but you've been able to get some really strong performances. Jerome Ford averaging 4.4 yards per carry, 381 yards so far with 2 touchdowns and 3 big runs. Kareem Hunt has been excellent in short yardage, 158 on 46 yards with 4 touchdowns this season. 4 for Kareem Hunt. He got 4 touchdowns already. This run game already has 8 rushing touchdowns. Last year, they accounted for 19. So they're on pace to hit that number as well. This run game, production-wise, is on pace to not really lose much production despite losing one of the most productive running backs in the NFL. Pierre Strong, another guy who deserves a shout out, 4.6 yards per carry, has a long of 40 and a touchdown, and 143 yards. And then once Deshaun gets back, he will obviously be a part of the run game, or DTR, PJ Walker, whoever, right? They have gotten a lot out this run game. They really have. They've gotten a lot out this run game that you wouldn't have expected. We all thought it would be a downtick in rushing production, but this year it's been an uptick in rushing production, despite the fact that Nick Chubb only played 5 quarters for you. And you wonder, like, what could this look like if Nick Chubb would have stayed in here? But the fact that we're not talking about this run game being a disaster, and that when you look at the big picture of this run game, they're still at the top of the league, that tells you everything you need to know about how much those guys have overachieved this season. So give a shout out to that run game when you see it. Dawand Jones is another overachiever. Guy came in as a 4th round pick. He was playing in the Hall of Fame game. Not very many people play in the Hall of Fame game that end up being starting quality players in their rookie year. But Dawand Jones certainly looks like he might be that, if not more. He has stepped in at right tackle, taken over for a former All-Pro in Jack Conklin. And the best thing I can say about Dawand Jones, and this is a hell of a feat, is that we ain't thought about Jack Conklin since. Honestly, we not even thinking about Jack Conklin for the future. We already are on the Dawand Jones as the right tackle for this team life, in that if you can trade Jack Conklin at the end of this season, because he's hurt now, I think it's very difficult to trade him at this point. But if you can trade Jack Conklin at the end of the season and get off that contract and give him to somebody who does need a right tackle, you might be in a space to add some capital that's very important for you. And I think that that's probably the way it's going to go, because Jack Conklin been injured. Dawand Jones steps in, plays better. He's been playing better than the other guys on that offensive line that we expect to be at All-Pro level. So shout out to Dawand, definitely overachieving. Another overachiever for this team this year is Amari Cooper. And it's not because I had low expectations for Amari Cooper. It's because I had high expectations for Coop, and Coop is exceeding those expectations. He has become a go-to guy in a way that I did not anticipate him becoming a go-to guy for the Cleveland Browns. And what I mean by that is, I talked about this last year, where if you're the Cleveland Browns, you needed a wide receiver to emerge as the go-to guy. 3rd down, 4th down, touchdown, you need to throw the ball. Who are you looking at? That guy has been Amari Cooper for this team. He's on pace for about 1,200 yards this season. He's been excellent for this team, has come up in clutch situations, has been able to draw penalties while also making plays, and coming up clutch in late game situations. We all thought that Elijah Moore would kind of take that spot from him, but the more and more Amari Cooper plays, the more and more it makes sense for the Cleveland Browns to not even consider moving off of him this offseason, because he has been so reliable. And you talk about 9 big plays charted from him on ESPN's charts. So that's huge. That's huge. He's been the most explosive player on this team, and I think that Amari is one of the biggest overachievers in this team, because he's older, but he keeps getting better. David Njoku is also somebody who's overachieved. And if you look at the stat line, you wouldn't really see why I'm putting David in the overachiever pile, even though I think he's on pace for a career year. 293 in 7 games, times that by 17. Yeah, he's on pace for about 700 yards, which would be up in the top 10 in tight end yards usually. So it would be a good season, but I put him in the overachiever pile because the man got his face burnt. Okay, he got his face burnt, played well, and continued to play well. He hasn't missed a game. He's been one of the more explosive players. Again, 3 big time plays for him as well this season. I think getting him involved more in the offense, regardless of who is at quarterback, is going to be a massive key to this team's success down the line. And I think that, we got to give David Njoku his respect for being an overachiever, because he's certainly been that so far this season. Maurice Hurst is another one that's been an overachiever. You talk about a guy that we were talking about maybe making the roster, and technically he did get cut on 53, but it was to bring him back. But he's somebody who made the roster, stayed healthy, and the big thing with Maurice Hurst was, hey, if he stays healthy, we think that's a good player. And he stayed healthy. He's been an excellent player. He had that interception last week. He's been making plays all week. He's been one of the Browns' best interior defensive linemen, and honestly, one of the Browns' best defensive linemen, period. It's hard to understate what Maurice Hurst has done for this team so far. He's been excellent. He gives you depth in that rotation. And another player that I would be remiss if I did not include in this overachiever pile is Jordan Elliott. And look, kudos to Jordan Elliott, because nobody was more out on Jordan Elliott than me. I was Mr. Out on Jordan. I thought Jordan Elliott should got a cut. I thought Jordan Elliott was done. I was not on the Jordan Elliott train. But he's been a really good player this year. A really, really good player and a very improved player. He's been somebody to watch in the run game. He's made more than a couple run stuffs. He's made some pass rushes that have looked nice. Like, this looks like the guy that they drafted that they thought had this massive upside coming out of Missouri. That's what Jordan Elliott looks like. Like, when he got drafted, people were talking about him as if he could be kind of a Sheldon Richardson type player. And he has looked more like that this year than he's ever looked like that before, giving you quality snaps, quality productions. He's not perfect. I think sometimes when they get ran up the middle, he's a bit of a culprit there, but he's been much, much improved and overachieved any of my expectations for him, given that I didn't think he was somebody who was able to make the roster for this Browns team. So when I'm wrong, I gotta give credit where credit is due, and Jordan Elliott deserves all of that credit. But those are my overachievers, and I wanted to make sure when I put this list together. So if there's a player that you think should be on here, if you think Myles Garrett should be on here or Denzel Ward should be on here, given that they've overachieved the expectations for them, I felt like this was a list for the guys who aren't going to be talked about all the time, right? Myles Garrett, he's one of the biggest names in football. He's obviously one of the best defensive players in the NFL, if not of his era. He's always going to be discussed in a positive light. Denzel Ward, one of the best corners in the NFL. And you can make the argument, since we were kind of up and down with him coming into the season, that he should make the overachiever pile. And I think it's a good enough argument, but I left them off of this because I wanted to leave it for guys who kind of don't get as much talk about, right? The guys that I can't just release a video with their name as the center of it and people are going to watch it, because these aren't the guys that we're always talking about, right? I can make a video about how great Denzel Ward is at any time. People are going to come tune in. I can make a video about how great Myles Garrett has been, and people are going to tune in. But if I start talking about just like, oh, the Pierre Strong video, nobody's going to want to watch that, right? These are guys who are more unsung on this list that I felt like deserved some credit and some praise, because in some way they have massively overachieved. on their expectations. Again, you can argue about PJ Walker's production. You can argue about who you think should have been the backup. But if I told you that you would have a backup quarterback for 3 games against the San Francisco 49ers, on the road against the Colts, and on the road against the Seahawks, and you would go 2-1, you would be thrilled. You wouldn't care how you got there. You would be thrilled with that backup. But for whatever reason, I think we've lost sight of that with PJ Walker, partly because he just hasn't been playing that well, right? And he turns the ball over a lot. But I also think he does make some big time throws at times. And it's a gamble that you just have to be willing to go with PJ Walker. But at the end of the day, the expectations for a backup quarterback aren't so it looks pretty when you win, but the expectations are to win, right? Or give yourself a chance to win. PJ's lived up and exceeded those expectations because, again, 2-1 in that stretch was not something that we anticipated. The run game, obviously being on track to be more productive than Nick Chubb without Nick Chubb is impressive from this run game. Dawand Jones looking like he's better than an all-pro tackle already. I mean, it's impressive. Coop being somebody that not only is a number 1 receiver, but a number 1 receiver that's carried bad quarterback play. That's not what we expected. David Njoku playing through burns. Nobody expected that. Maurice Hurst staying healthy and playing at this high of a level. Nobody expected that. And Jordan Elliott being a productive player to this team. Nobody expected that. That's why these guys are on the list. And some of the more high-profile guys are on the list. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. You guys have a great day. Have an even better night.